Hey everyone, today I'm in Fort Sill National Cemetery, and this is located right outside of Lawton, Oklahoma. And in my opinion, this is sacred ground. There are a lot of heroes that have been interred into these grounds. And they're not only heroes in my book, but in a lot of other people's books. Some of them are people that I know, friends, even friends that have family members in here. And to me, they're all honorable people. You can't thank these people enough for what they've done, what they've sacrificed. But occasionally you run across somebody that should not be in national cemeteries such as this. And there is one in this cemetery. And I wanted to tell you about him just a little bit and tell you why people like that should not be in these cemeteries. Now, this cemetery is fairly new. It was established in 2001. So there's about 8,000 people that have been interred into these sacred grounds. Off in the distance there, you can see the Wichita Mountains. It's very scenic up here, and today it is very windy. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard about the Oklahoma City bombing, and one of the people that was responsible for that horrific event was Timothy McVeigh. What you may not know about him is that he served honorably in the U.S. Army during the Persian Gulf. In fact, he has a Bronze Star, so he was a highly decorated soldier. But his actions after he got out of the service is what determined who he was and erased everything that he had done. Now, after that event took place in 1995, it was determined that anybody responsible for capital murder is not fit to be honored in these national cemeteries, which is great. That's how it should be. No one should be in here being honored among other heroes for something despicable that they did after their service or even during their service. But there are other things that people have done, and it does not exclude them from being honored, in quotation marks, within a national cemetery. And that's what I want to show you today, is one person that is here in the Fort Sill National Cemetery that absolutely should not be in this cemetery. And I'm sure there are other ones all across in other cemeteries across the United States. And I want to make it known that those people should not be in a cemetery where there are heroes in here. And I want to make it to where people in the future cannot be placed in cemeteries like that. Now, these are the front gates into Fort Sill National Cemetery, and immediately on your left is section 30. Then you just have to go a few rows back, and then, in fact, it's 4 rows back and 5 graves over. All these men are heroes in my book, except this one right here. James A. Selby, says Specialist 4, U.S. Army, Persian Gulf, October 16th, 1966 to November 22nd, 2004, always in our hearts. Don't believe that he belongs in this sacred ground here. And the reason is he committed a series of rapes, violent rapes, across 5 different states. Don't know exactly when it began or where it began, but the first documented case is here in Oklahoma, specifically in Cleveland County, Oklahoma, where I grew up. Of course, this happened in the town of Noble, or at least in the outskirts of Noble. And he raped a 9-year-old girl in 1999. That's his first documented case. Now, what I have to preface that with is approximately 40% of all rapes are reported, so there's no telling how many others that he did. And I don't want to give the victims' names here. If you want to know more in detail, you can look on Netflix And there's the Cold Case series, and I think it was done in 2006. And it documents the whole process of what he did, how he did it, how he got caught, how they linked him with DNA to each and every rape case. But like I said, about 40% of those probably get reported. So there could be a bigger path of destruction that he's done. But think of that happening to a 9-year-old girl, and the rest of her life she has to live with that, even though he is dead and gone. But that is something that's going to haunt her forever. Now, after this case in Oklahoma, he goes to Nevada, and then he rapes a 12-year-old girl in Nevada. And from there, he graduates to older women, college students, goes up into San Diego, California, does some there, goes to Arizona, does some there, even does a 55-year-old woman in Colorado. Now, eventually, he's caught through the jurisdictions of several police departments working together, the CODIS system, his DNA. And he's found guilty in Colorado, and then he's shipped to Arizona to face his trials there in Arizona for what he did there. One of the victims, he even tried to slit the throat of. Left her for dead, but she was able to get away and notify people, and a rape kit was done, which linked his DNA. And that eventually led to his downfall. But that was certainly a brave young woman, and all of these young women came forward and had to go through unimaginable things, and then to come forward, and just the embarrassment and the destruction and the mental games that this would play with you for the rest of your life. These women are affected by this, and that's why people like James should never be in a cemetery with all these other veterans who have served honorably and went on to have families of their own and respectable lives, while this particular person right here is in this cemetery and does not deserve honor. Yes, he served in the Persian Gulf, and yes, he might have been affected by things that happened there, but it doesn't give him the right to destroy other people's lives. Something that these women have to live with forever. It affects relationships, families, all sorts of things. I want to make it known that people like this should not be buried in cemeteries like this. I'm a veteran myself. I come from a long line of veterans within my family, and I know that nobody in my family wants someone like this buried in a national cemetery. They're not deserving of respect and honor in sacred grounds such as this. Now, after James was found guilty in Colorado, he was shipped out to Arizona, where he would face more charges, which included rape. I think he thought he was some sort of high-class criminal, much like a Ted Bundy or something, and he could outsmart the system. He dropped the public defender and decided to take on that task himself. The problem is he was lousy at it, and 2 weeks later he went back to the public defender. He was found guilty of all his rape charges in Arizona, and later that day he was found dead in his jail cell. He committed suicide. One more cowardly act by a veteran who committed many cowardly acts after an honorable service. Now, when I say cowardly act, I'm simply referring to what he did to those young women and those little girls. He's not worthy of being buried in this cemetery, and neither is anyone else who has done anything like that. They are not deserving of full military honors that are given within this cemetery. These men and women that you see here are veterans who have honorably served this country. They've been discharged and become productive members of society. In this very section, there are veterans who have died while in service to this country. James and people like him do not deserve to be buried here. They've committed acts of violence that could affect people for the rest of their lives. And him being buried here is a slap in the face to every victim, every woman, or every little girl that has experienced anything like that, especially his victims. Please consider writing to your congressmen as well as your senators and Veterans Administration to help keep these types of people out of these cemeteries. I'm not saying that he can't be buried in another cemetery. He just is not deserving to be buried in this cemetery. I'm a veteran. I come from a family of veterans, and I have many friends who are veterans and have the same exact feelings that I do.